Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is yet another rant, and it's on a familiar topic. It's on the topic of physical media, and specifically the fact that it is dead, or it's going to die out, or it's on life support, or it's on its last legs. And I did a video on this topic a while back. The video is called The Death of Physical Media, a rant. And I didn't really think that I would be doing another video on the same topic, but here we are. Because for whatever reason, people still don't understand that the format itself is actually doing pretty well in a certain context. They just seem to think that because of the fact that the format is doing poorly or is not selling as well and it's being taken out of the market in certain instances, then that means that it's dying and its days are numbered. And that their stance, that physical media itself is a dying breed, is something that is solidified because of recent events. And I can understand why, if you apply a certain context to it, you might think that way. But let me fill you in on some things here. Physical media itself as a format is far from dead. It's actually doing quite well when it comes to sales within certain parameters, which are honestly the new parameters for physical media in general, and the reason why it's going to survive for at least a decade or more. And that hasn't really changed since the last time I did a video on this topic. The market has shifted. No longer is the market for physical media being solely big box stores and mainstream audiences. Now it's a more niche market. I talked about this in the other video, and things have honestly just remained the same, if not been more solidified, when it comes to the fact that physical media as a format with Blu-rays and 4Ks and so on, they are now making most of their profit and surviving based off of revenue that they obtain from collectors, from a niche market. And I think that's what's being confused here. That's what's being lost in translation. People think that, oh, well, Best Buy is pulling out of the market. Best Buy is not going to be selling physical media at some point in 2024. So that means that that the format itself is not going to be around that much longer. And Disney, they pulled out of Australia entirely. And Target is rumored to also be pulling out of the physical media market. And so I could see why some people could look at that and think physical media is dead. But that's ignoring niche markets and labels like Arrow Video that are releasing box sets like this that are doing quite well in terms of sales right now. And honestly, putting way too much emphasis on revenue streams like Best Buy that really weren't really necessarily representing that large of a number when it comes to the market in the first place. Best Buy, if you look at the numbers, they only got around like 4% of physical media sales. So they're not even like the big market. And these numbers, I don't even know if they're even including the labels in terms of direct sales to these labels like Arrow Video and Scream Factory and Vinegar Syndrome and Severin. Uh, it might just be that these numbers are being tallied from these retailers like Amazon and Target and Best Buy and Walmart and so on and so forth. Which is why when you look at the stats, DVDs still are like the most profitable or the highest selling format compared to Blu-ray and 4K. But that's probably because they're only looking at sales from these retailers and maybe not looking at them when it comes to sales directly to these labels. And that's what the future of physical media is. I have argued this point in the past, and I'll continue to argue it today. The future of physical media is not going to be in big box stores like Best Buy, Walmart, Target, you name it. That was never going to be the future of this format. That was never going to be how it was going to survive. Physical media as a format had to evolve. It had to move past big box stores and had to find a way to reliably sustain itself without them. And I feel that it's done that. It's found a new evolution when it comes to focusing more on the niche market, which is collectors like myself and maybe other people who might be clicking on this video. And in that regard, it's thriving. It's actually doing really well. And I know that some people will look at it and be like, well, what happens if these major studios decide to pull out entirely and they're no longer releasing physical media themselves? And that is definitely a valid argument to make. And you could see studios pulling something like that in the future. But as long as they are still making some form of profit from these sales, I don't think they're going to stop distributing films on disc. I really don't feel that they're going to do that because I don't feel that their digital purchases are nearly as profitable. A lot of people just buy a subscription to Netflix, Amazon Prime, Paramount Plus, Peacock, whatever streaming service you can think of, and they don't even bother with digital rentals. They don't even bother with buying things digitally. A lot of the market is probably just solely for these subscriptions. So I don't feel that these studios are going to completely pull out because some profit is better than nothing. And if that does happen, they'll just make a deal with some of these other labels that are still getting revenue from collectors and they'll make deals with them so they can still make some profit off of physical media in general. So I don't necessarily buy that the studios are going to pull out entirely, at least not anytime soon. Also, I kind of find it funny that the argument is that, oh, because Best Buy and Disney and Target and so on, they're pulling out, that means that the format itself is going to die and it's going to be dead. And I'm like, well, what about all these other pharmaceutical places like Walgreens and Rite Aid that are not doing well? In fact, Rite Aid just filed for bankruptcy. People aren't necessarily losing interest in or not wanting to buy drugs anymore. That's not the case. It's just the market has shifted. And I'm not saying that the revenue stream for physical media is the same as pharmaceuticals. Not even remotely the case at all because they're not comparable. I mean, the sales for pharmaceuticals are way higher and way more reliable than physical media. But the thing is that if something like that, if Rite Aid, which was a company that had been around for decades, can struggle and not be able to keep things going and has to file for bankruptcy when it comes to something as reliable as pharmaceuticals, that just really shows you that what the product is not the problem. The product itself is not the issue when it comes to it not being sold in these big box stores. It's that things are shifting entirely away from big box stores. It's been that way for a long time. So what's happening is things are moving more towards online sales. And so the same thing applies to physical media. And I know that, oh, well, Disney and Best Buy and Target and so on, and I get it. But let's apply some context to those three, shall we? Disney does not really put that much of an emphasis on physical media in general, and really hasn't for a while now. In fact, I think they completely discontinued the Disney Movie Club in some markets as well. Disney is also in a precarious position right now financially. It's kind of crazy to think about it that Disney, who was known as being this golden goose of entertainment, is now struggling and is losing money. And because of the fact that that is the reality with Disney right now, because theme park sales are dwindling and they're not nearly as high as they once were, and their movies aren't doing as well, now they're looking at ways to cut costs and to cut uh, uh, corners. And one of them is to pull physical media entirely out of certain markets because the market is not profitable enough. So it's a quick and easy way for them to stop the bleeding a little bit. And so I think that's what's happening with them in Australia. Also, if you look at Australia, Disney themselves aren't necessarily, as a company, entirely responsible for physical media distribution in Australia. Like you would think that would be the case since it's Disney and so on. It's actually a separate company. So that separate company is hurting right now. So they are pulling out of Australia. So it's not just a Disney thing. It's more complicated than that. When it comes to Best Buy, it's a similar thing. They are not doing as well financially. They probably won't be around in the next 5 years if you really think about it when it comes to the things that are going on within the big box markets, especially something as specialized as Best Buy. So they haven't been doing as well financially. So physical media is a quick and easy way to cut costs and to not have to have so much in their warehouses, not have to pay so much for storage for the physical media. And they also look at it as we don't make as much profit off of physical media as we do compared to other sales. So Best Buy pulling out is just an example of Best Buy themselves not doing that well. If Best Buy was doing fine, I don't think they would even bother because they wouldn't even really care about cutting costs. They would be like, oh, yeah, physical media sales are dwindling and they're not doing as well as years past, but we're doing so great that, we're still making enough profit. We're making some profit, at least, from these sales, so we'll keep them in the store. But because Best Buy's struggling, now they're not going to do that anymore. And because they're not even going to do it online. That shows you how much they're struggling. Is they're not even going to be selling physical media online anymore. Target, well, Target has always been cutting things, cutting back on physical media. They've been doing that for years, so this is nothing new. Like if they decide to completely cut it out entirely, that's not surprising. If you've been following what Target has been doing, now if they stop it entirely online, that would be interesting because Target's doing better than a company like Best Buy, for instance. But I mean, all you have to look at is let's look at another big box store, for instance. Let's look at Walmart. Walmart, which is arguably even bigger than Best Buy and maybe even bigger than Target, has just spent money to obtain a distribution house. I think that's what it is, a distribution house or some kind of manufacturing plant that is connected to physical media. So Walmart is looking at what's going on with Best Buy pulling out and then putting their foot in the door and taking over a certain part of the market. So Walmart is looking at it as something where it can still make some money from it. Amazon, which is a behemoth at this point, and is a big reason why a lot of these other big box stores are struggling and why things are shifting when it comes to the market as a whole. They are going to be releasing these Steelbook exclusives that were originally going to Best Buy exclusives and so on. You've already started to see that with the Halloween H2O Steelbook, for instance. That's something that would have been a Best Buy exclusive, but now Amazon is also selling it. So Amazon is going to be uh, definitely involved with physical media in the future. It does suck for fans of the format. It sucks for collectors. It sucks for people who like the experience of going to a big box store. And the fact that they're going to have to rely more upon buying direct from the labels and more on Amazon and some of these other places than just going to Best Buy or Target or whichever other store that they go to in terms of doing their other shopping. It sucks that that is what's going to happen now, and it's going to be even more of an inconvenience at times. It does suck that we're going to have to rely more upon online markets in terms of their shipping and how that can be sometimes unreliable sometimes in terms of getting items that are in good condition. But that does open the door if you are able to support other retailers who specialize in physical media, like Orbit or Diablique, um, or Grindhouse, or some of these other places, or just support your local business. If you are lucky enough to have a place that sells physical media, like over here in Portland, like Everyday Music, or really Music Millennium is like the best possible option that I can think of off the top of my head in Portland, in the Pacific Northwest, at least where I'm at. Because over here in Vancouver, Washington, there's really not a lot of options other than like a local record shop. And Fred Meyer is overpriced. And so is a lot of these other places. And honestly, a lot of places pulled out anyway over where I'm at. Like the Best Buy did that already, and so did Target in terms of downsizing their physical media. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Target locally here just completely gets rid of it. Um, but that doesn't mean that the format itself is dying. It just means that the way of selling it in a big box store that you could just go to is unfortunately, honestly, on its last legs. Like that is what's on life support right now. That is what's dying, really. It's the old way. It's the old way of selling physical media in a store, and specifically a retail market. So the fact that these retailers are pulling out, that's not really a sign that the format itself is not long for this world. Trust me. The sales are really good with these labels right now, with Kino Lorber and Scream Factory and Vinegar Syndrome, Severin, you name it. And I know there is an argument to be had that maybe in the future, like what happens if these labels run out of titles to release and the collector's market starts to dry up, and that's an argument for another time. And I think that that's honestly something that's not going to happen for at least a decade or more. Because I feel that these labels still have plenty of titles that they can release in 4K, they can re release, or they can do other things with, or they can have other titles that haven't come out yet that they can obtain licenses to and release to the niche collector's market. Also, I feel physical media And when it comes to collecting movies in particular on physical media, I think that will have a longer shelf life than CDs, for instance, or even records, because there's just a certain market that I think will always exist. And I feel there will always be a market for records and stuff like that too, but not necessarily in the same capacity. And so I feel that you will also have an opportunity for new people to come along, new collectors who decide to become interested in physical media and collecting it, who will come along, and then these niche markets, even though yeah, re-releases are kind of tiresome, they'll come in and they'll do a re-release of a big popular title, with a limited quantity and with like a different slipcover or something or whatever. And then these newer markets will come in and they will you know help keep the doors open when it comes to these labels. So I think these labels, they're gonna stick around for a while, from what I've been noticing from the collectors market and so on. But yeah, that is something to definitely think about, is what will happen when the well dries up. But there's also an argument to be had that it will never fully dry up to begin with, because the focus is no longer on as wide of an audience as possible for physical media as a format and as a way of obtaining or retaining finances or cash flow. It's more about a niche market. It's more about a select smaller market. So it's a lot easier to profit from that, and it's a lot easier to continue to profit from that market because it's not as large, it's not as big. So yeah, that's just my piece. That's my rant on the topic of physical media being dead. And I hope I don't have to do a third part, but who knows? But thanks for watching part two. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.